Before we begin, a quick hello to anyone new here. This channel is where we tell true stories about family, how love gets tested, and how, sometimes, it learns to fight back. If that's the kind of story that steadies you on hard days, consider subscribing. It helps these stories find the people who might need them most. The shock in the ER. Hospitals have a way of measuring time in beeps. That night, the monitor above my husband's bed kept time like a metronome trying to be brave. Ed lay pale against the thin pillow, one palm pressed to the center of his chest, as if he were holding shut a door the wind insisted on opening. I remember thinking how out of place his wedding band looked against all that antiseptic white, a small circle of promise in a room made of conditions. Chest pain, shortness of breath, the color gone from his face. Our son Mark called 911 before I could finish saying, "We're fine." We weren't. We rode in with the siren, the kind of wail you only really hear from the inside. In triage, they put a blood pressure cuff on him, leads on his chest, a wristband on his arm with a barcode that made him feel less like a person and more like something borrowed. A cardiologist with tired eyes and the gentleness of someone who has spent a lifetime walking people back from ledges came in. "I'm Dr. Patel," he said, and he spoke in a voice that didn't want to scare us and couldn't afford to lie. He showed us the film, the arteries drawn like dry creek beds on a drought map. "Significant occlusion," he said, pointing. "Left anterior descending. This one here, 70 to 90%. We need to intervene tonight or first thing in the morning. Stents if we can, bypass if we must." My daughter, Julia, squeezed my hand. She always did that when she was a child and the thunder came. She did it now without looking at me, as if childhood knew something adulthood had forgotten. The nurse slipped a paper into the plastic sleeve at the end of the bed. On the top corner, someone had scribbled codes in a sharp, decisive hand: I-21. 4 NSTEMI, I-20. 0 unstable angina. I didn't know those numbers, but I knew what they meant by the way Dr. Patel's mouth thinned, the heart was sending up flares. "Let's get authorization," he told the unit clerk. "Urgent. If hope has an enemy, its name is hold music." We waited while the clerk called the number on the back of Ed's insurance card. It belonged to the plan he had through Mark's employer. A good job, strong benefits, the sort of thing you say in grateful tones until the rules grow teeth. On the second call, the clerk handed the phone to a woman in a glass cubicle. I watched her nod, then stop nodding, then sit perfectly still as if even breathing might make things worse. She came to the doorway with the phone held out like something hot. "Mrs. Lawson, they want to speak with you." On the line, a voice that could have been a recording, pleasant, practiced, somewhere far away. "This is Natalie from Utilization Management. We've reviewed the request for percutaneous coronary intervention and potential coronary artery bypass grafting." I stared at Ed, his eyes closed now, his breath shallow, his knuckles white. "I'm sorry," the voice said, "but the request is denied, not medically necessary at this time." The room did a strange thing then, it folded. The corners moved closer. The fluorescent lights hummed louder. For a second, I could hear nothing but the sound of my own pulse in my ears, like a door pounding to be opened. "Not medically necessary," Dr. Patel repeated, his professionalism tugging hard on the leash. "We have troponins rising, EKG changes, unstable symptoms. What criteria are you using?" The voice softened, the way people soften when they know the words won't land any gentler. "We don't see a recent stress test in the file, and the documentation doesn't demonstrate failed optimal medical therapy of sufficient duration." "Optimal medical therapy?" I said. "He's been on everything they've prescribed for months." The clerk put a printout in my hands, a hospital estimate like a storm cloud. Estimated charges for PCI/cab. $180,000. At the bottom, a line in small type: "Patients may appeal within 72 hours for urgent determinations." I traced the numbers with my finger as if there were a secret door in them I could press to make this unhappen. Julia swallowed hard. "Mom, they can't just say no, not to his heart." "They can," Mark said quietly, and I could hear the shame in his voice, a son ashamed of a thing that wasn't his fault. "Sometimes they do." Dr. Patel took the phone. He spoke in the language of his training, firm and spare. I'd like an immediate peer-to-peer. If this patient leaves without intervention, he is at high risk. There are moments when a family becomes a single body. We breathe together. We watch together. We waited together for a stranger to decide if the man we loved qualified for the care his body had already asked for. The voice came back. We can schedule a physician to physician review first thing in the morning. We do not have an approving cardiologist available overnight. First thing in the morning, Dr. Patel said evenly, and he looked at me then with the candor of a man who has had to balance medicine with the machinery wrapped around it. I'll admit him to observation. We'll start Roman 4 heparin, but if authorization doesn't come through, they may pressure us to discharge. Discharge, the word felt obscene. Ed opened his eyes. Claire, he whispered, because after 39 years he never needed many words with me, I'm tired. I pressed my lips to his forehead. He was cool there, cooler than a man should be when the world is this uncertain. Rest, I said, though we both knew sleep has never made bureaucracy kinder. When the nurse stepped out, I turned to Dr. Patel. If they say no in the morning, what happens? We appeal, he said. Urgent appeal. You have 72 hours from the denial. We assemble every piece of evidence. We make it impossible to ignore. I nodded because this was something to do, and doing is how some of us keep from breaking. Outside the curtain, the hospital continued its steady chorus. The squeak of a cart, the thud of distant footsteps, the laugh that should not be here and yet always is. I could hear Mark on his phone, searching for phrases I'd never wanted to learn. Medical necessity criteria, ICT 10, urgent appeal success rate. I could hear Julia praying under her breath, not the kind of prayer that asks for miracles, but the kind that asks for a door to stay open a little longer. A case manager came with forms. If the plan stands by the denial, she said, choosing each word as if it were a glass she might drop, we'll need a discharge signature. I looked at the line where my name would go. It was so small you could miss it if you weren't paying attention. The little place where a story can turn from one thing into another. I thought about the first time Ed and I danced in our kitchen, bare feet and tomato sauce bubbling on the stove, and how ordinary happiness is until someone tries to itemize it. I won't sign, I said. Not loudly, not bravely, just the way you say your own name. The case manager studied my face, then nodded as if something in it made sense to her. I'll note that. Dr. Patel adjusted the drip, checked the monitor, and then, because decency is a habit with some people, he stayed a moment longer than he had to. He placed a finger on the film again, on the stubborn artery that had forgotten its job. Mrs. Lawson, he said gently, you deserve the truth straight. If we don't intervene soon, the statistics aren't kind. For this pattern, this level of obstruction, if we don't operate within 48 hours, the risk of mortality can triple. Some nights are made of numbers. This one was 48, 72, 180,000, and one more number I wouldn't say out loud, the years we still wanted. The monitor kept beeping. Ed closed his eyes. I took his hand and did the only thing I could do with nothing decided. I held on. By morning, the hospital smelled like new coffee and last night's fear. Ed dozed in gray slices, a man bargaining with sleep. The monitor still kept time for us. I watched it the way sailors watch a horizon, waiting for a change in the water. Dr. Patel rounded early, quiet shoes, steady hands. He checked the drip, listened with his stethoscope, and spoke softly so the words wouldn't bruise. He's stable for now, he said. We're on heparin and beta blockers. I've requested the peer-to-peer for 8:30. He looked at me as if we were partners in this, the kind of kindness that keeps a wife from drowning. Eat something if you can. I nodded. Eating felt like proof I believed in lunch. Mark returned with a paper cup and that awkward guilt sons wear when they can't fix what hurts their parents. He is 35 and still has his little league posture when he's worried, shoulders rounded, eyes searching the floor for answers he might have dropped there. I brought black, he said. Like you take it. Thank you, I said and meant it. Small mercies carry more weight in rooms like this. There is a kind of work you do when you cannot do the real work. You gather papers, you make piles, you turn chaos into stacks the way a child turns stones into forts. I opened my phone and found the benefits packet Mark's company had sent at the beginning of the year. An email liked and filed, and never read because we were busy and fine and young enough in our minds to be permanent. The document was called the Summary Plan Description, which is the sort of phrase that hides its teeth. It was 48 pages long and spoke in a voice that reminded you the company had lawyers and time. I skimmed through sections like scenery on a train, eligibility, coverage, exclusions, coordination of benefits. Then I slowed where the track grew tricky: medical necessity, pre-authorization, appeals. We had already met the deductible. We were within reach of the out-of-pocket maximum for the year. $9,000, which is the kind of number a family can say out loud if they also say, "We'll figure it out and we'll cut back." 180,000 is a different language altogether. That's the kind of number you don't say in front of a heart monitor. There was a footnote near the appeals section. For urgent determinations, you may request an expedited review within 72 hours. On the next page, a sentence like a shrug. The plan retains sole discretion to determine medical necessity. I read it again. Sole discretion. When you're young, you think discretion is a graceful, neighborly word. In hospitals, it is a gate. Julia arrived with a change of clothes and her teacher's tote bag, the one that holds snacks and papers, and the composure she lends to other people's children. She kissed her father's temple and looked at the screen. "It's steadier," she said, as if praising a student for trying. Then she opened an old spiral notebook and began making a list with the ruthless kindness she reserves for crisis. Medications, dates, symptoms, phone numbers, names, times. She underlined times twice. "We should have pushed for the stress test in August," she said suddenly, as if the past would listen. "Remember, they said the scheduling backlog was 6 weeks. Then the nurse said since his episodes were improved, we could wait. Then it just fell off the list." "She's not wrong," Mark said. Purcert kept asking for more notes, then it never got scheduled. Last year, a different denial had arrived like rain on a Sunday. Not enough to ruin anything, just enough to dampen. Ed's doctor had ordered a calcium scoring CT to quantify risk. The plan called it screening and rejected it. We shrugged and kept walking. Looking back now, that little no felt like a dress rehearsal for this one. Case manager stopped by and asked for insurance cards she already had copies of. She explained payment plans in a careful tone, as if she were trying to discuss the weather at a funeral. "If the plan continues to deny, we can explore financial assistance," she said. "But because you have coverage, we'd need to see a formal final denial." "We'll appeal," I said. "You should," she said, and the way she said should felt like a blessing in a church that had forgotten hymns. I went back to the plan document. There were phrases I'd never noticed in decades of being insured and lucky. Prior authorization is not a guarantee of payment. Services must be medically necessary as determined by the plan. External review may be available under state or federal law. In the margin of the PDF, some benefits manager with a neat hand, had inserted a note in blue. Claims administered by Blue Summit Health on behalf of the plan. I didn't know what "on behalf of" really meant. I only knew it sounded like someone else was steering our boat from a different shore. Ed's eyes opened. There is a way husbands look at wives when they need them to be both lighthouse and dock. "What are you reading?" he asked. "Directions," I said, "for a maze." He smiled the smallest smile, the one that means I hear you even when I can't get up to stand beside you. The unit phone rang, and the clerk waved to Dr. Patel. He took the call, turned to the glass to hide his face, then turned back. 8:30 is confirmed," he said. "Plan cardiologist on the line, will present everything." He tapped the chart. "We have the EKGs, the troponin rises, the cath films. We have symptoms refractory to medication." Mark sat down, elbows on knees. "If they still say no," he asked, "what happens?" "We keep him on medical therapy," Dr. Patel said. "He didn't add for as long as we dare." "He didn't have to." "Mom," Julia said, "we need everything in one place." She drew boxes on a page and labeled them: labs, imaging, physician notes, medication history, ER timeline, risk factors. She looked at me. "You gather the papers, I'll make the list. Mark can call HR and ask what to ask." Mark nodded. "I'll see if they can put pressure from their side." "This isn't your fault," I said, and watched his jaw move in that stubborn way sons inherit from fathers. A nurse named Latoya slid a chair next to my husband, lowered the lights a notch, and tucked the blanket around his feet. Cold travels up, she said, the way grandmothers talk. Then she looked at me. You the wife? I am. She squeezed my shoulder. Wives run the war room, she said. You let me know what you need. There are people who don't belong to you and still claim you. Just for a moment on a morning when everything is borrowed, I let her kindness tether me. At 7:30, the cafeteria opened and a volunteer pushed a cart of coffee down the hall like a sacrament. I took 2 milks and a handful of sugar packets I didn't need. My hands like to hold things when my heart is busy. Mark came back from the hallway. I left a message with HR, he said. They start at 9. He sat, stared at his father, and added, I hate that my job is even connected to this. The words stuck. Mom, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell him the truth we forget to tell our children. Nothing you did brought us here. Everything you do now helps us leave. Instead, I put the milk on his knee and said, Stir. The clerk printed the denial letter and slid it into a clear sleeve. Words look more official when they're trapped behind plastic. I read it again. Denied, not medically necessary. Below, a list of criteria met and not met as if the human body were a multiple choice exam. I took out my notebook and began to translate our life into the language of forms. Symptoms: chest pressure, radiating to left arm, shortness of breath at rest. Onset: intermittent over 3 months, worse in last 72 hours. Medications: aspirin, statin, beta blocker, nitrates compliant. Imaging: cath last year showing 70% lesion in LAD, progression suspected. Risk: diabetic, family history, his father age 58. Work status: retired lineman who still climbs the basement stairs like a man counting blessings. I wrote the codes from the nurse's sheet in the top corner. I-21, 4, I-20, 0, as if I could speak their language well enough to be believed. I listed our plan numbers, the group ID, the member ID, the case number for the denial, the call reference code from last night. I didn't know if any of it would matter. I only knew that paper is how you make yourself visible to people who can't see your husband's face. Julia leaned in. If the appeal window is 72 hours, she said, we file today. We file again tomorrow if we have to. Appeals can be internal first, Mark said. Then external, I think. Internal, I repeated, tasting the word that had just locked the door. And who is the inside? No one answered. That seemed important. When you're married a long time, you measure your life in useful things: gardens that survived winter, cars you coaxed to one more inspection, pies you baked because someone you love likes the way the kitchen smells. This, I decided, would be one of those useful things. I could not open an artery with my hands, but I could build a file that would make it hard for someone with a headset to say no without looking away. Ed stirred. Claire? I'm here, I said. Don't let them send me home. I won't, I said, and felt the weight of the promise settle on my shoulders like a coat I chose. At 8:20, doctor. Patel stood by the phone, the clerk at his side with the chart, the nurse with a copy of labs. The hospital got quiet the way churches get quiet right before vows. The line clicked. A voice introduced himself by first name only, a cardiologist somewhere, with the plan. They exchanged pleasantries meant to oil a hard conversation. Dr. Patel began. Male, 68, unstable angina, rising troponins, dynamic EKG changes, significant LAD lesion documented previously, symptoms despite optimal medical therapy. I closed my eyes and pictured our backyard in summer. Ed's tomatoes tall and smug, the way he'd pinch a leaf and say, smell this, as if the garden were a perfume counter and we were rich. I put my palm over his, still and warm and mine. 72 hours to appeal, the document had said. 48 hours before the numbers turned mean, the doctor had said. 2 clocks ticking side by side, daring me to choose which one to obey. The peer-to-peer began at 8:30 with the kind of politeness that always makes me worry. Doctor, Patel stood by the wall phone, shoulders squared, eyes on Ed's EKG like a father at a crib. The plan's cardiologist introduced himself as Dr. S. No last name, as if anonymity could be a kind of armor. Doctor. Patel spoke first, a steady hand on a skittish horse. Male, 68, unstable angina. Troponins rising from 0.09 to 0.18. dynamic ST segment depression in the anterior leads, known LAD lesions 70% last year. Symptoms at rest despite aspirin, statin, beta blocker, nitrates. Recommendation: PCI this morning with standby for cab if warranted. There was a pause, a page turning on the other end. Do you have a recent non-invasive ischemia study? The plan cardiologist asked, the way a weatherman asks if you've looked outside before claiming it's raining. A stress test was requested in August, Dr. Patel said. Scheduling delays, symptoms progressed. He is not a candidate to treadmill this morning. He's symptomatic at rest. The voice said, as if tasting a fruit not yet ripe. Our criteria prefer documentation of failed optimal medical therapy over at least 90 days and a non-invasive study within 30. He's had months of medication. He's here now with unstable symptoms. That is the documentation. We have cath films from last year showing a significant lesion. I appreciate that, the voice replied, gentle as gauze. However, per Plan Section 5(2), without a recent stress test or demonstration that maximal therapy has failed for the required duration, this does not meet medical necessity. The call lasted 7 minutes. I counted them by Ed's breaths. When it ended, Dr. Patel pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose the way men do when they'd like to swear and won't. They want the stress test we can't safely do, he said. They want more time we don't have. What now? Julia asked. We push for a second-level review with their medical director, he said. We escalate. He glanced at Ed, then at me. And we keep him safe while we wait. Waiting is a verb and a wound. By 10 o'clock, a fax machine somewhere coughed out our verdict. The clerk brought it in a clear sleeve, still warm, like denial could be fresh-baked. The letter was 3 pages and familiar as a breakup note. It pretended to be about criteria when it was really about cost. Subject: request for percutaneous coronary intervention, CPT 92,928, with possible coronary artery bypass grafting, CPT 33,533 et al. Determination: denied, not medically necessary. Rationale: lack of recent documented ischemia on non-invasive testing. Insufficient evidence of failure of optimal medical therapy. Request does not meet Plan Section 5. 2 criteria for coronary revascularization. Beneath the block paragraphs were phrases dressed up in Sunday clothes. Emerging evidence suggests conservative management may be appropriate, outpatient evaluation recommended. In the margins, a footnote pointed to a guideline none of us had voted on. It read the way rulebooks read when no one's life is at stake. Mark took the packet, flipped to the final page, and jabbed a line with his finger. Here, you may file an urgent appeal within 72 hours of the date of this letter. The plan retains sole discretion to determine medical necessity. Sole discretion, I said. There's that gate again. At noon, the hospital operator patched Dr. Patel to a medical director for a second review. We watched his face the way you watch a referee. There's a certain way shoulders slump that tells you before the whistle blows. Understood, he said finally, and hung up. They upheld the denial, he told us, and the word upheld sounded like a scaffold. Ed shifted on the bed. I could try the test, he offered, because men in their 60s are built on willingness. You can't, Dr. Patel said, kind and firm. If I put you on that treadmill today, I'd be begging your heart to misbehave just to satisfy a paragraph. And if it did, we'd be right back here, only worse. Latoya came with a warm blanket and a look that reached the part of me that wanted to sit down and cry for exactly 19 minutes. She adjusted the Roman 4, smoothed the sheet, and whispered, "Paper folks don't hear beeps. We hear them for you." After she left, my phone buzzed with a number from Mark's company. HR. A woman named Carla apologized for the distress and explained politely that claim decisions were handled by Blue Summit Health, the plan administrator. We don't intervene in individual determinations, she said. I can send you the appeals process language and contact information. Send it, I said, because sometimes the only power you have is the power to collect. Julia began to read the denial letter aloud, as if saying the words could make them less slippery. Section 5. 2, she said. Here, Revascularization indicated with documented ischemia on stress imaging or failure of optimal medical therapy for 90 days. He's had months, I said. They want documentation, Mark said. Then we get documentation, I answered. I found the nurse's station and asked for the medical records office. A woman with a headset explained HIPAA authorizations and turnaround times and how stat isn't really a thing for paper. But if you're filing an urgent appeal, she added, lowering her voice the way people do when they decide to be human at work, I can flag your request. What do you need from me? I asked. Signed authorization from the patient to release records to his representative, she said. That's you. She faxed the form to the unit. I signed it with my name and 39 years of witness. Back in the room, Julia had divided the denial into parts the way teachers divide a problem so children won't feel drowned by it. Missing item #1, recent stress test. Missing item #2, proof of failed optimal therapy. Missing item #3, something undefined they could hide behind later. She left that box blank because she is honest even when it hurts. Mark called the number at the bottom of the letter for utilization management and requested the case file, the notes they used to decide our fate. An associate told him it would be made available upon request within reasonable time frames. Mark asked what reasonable meant. The associate said, soon. That's corporate for not now. Dr. Patel came in with his stethoscope around his neck and a stack of printed EKGs in his hand. I want to try one more thing, he said. He dialed, identified himself, and recited Ed's data like a catechism. Unstable at rest, troponins rising, not a good candidate for treadmill. He paused. What would satisfy your criteria today? On speaker, the medical director's voice softened again, always that softening. A non-invasive study within 30 days would help, or documentation that your patient has failed maximal anti-anginal therapy over the required duration. He's symptomatic on therapy, Dr. Patel said. That is failure. Not as the plan defines it, the voice replied. That's the thing about double-edged words, they can be true and still cut you. When he hung up, Dr. Patel looked at me. I'll keep him through tonight, he said, but there will be pressure to discharge. We need to build the strongest urgent appeal you can imagine. Letter of medical necessity, cath images, EKG trends, troponins, risk profile, medication history, every page a reason. Tell us what to ask for, I said. He took Julia's pen and wrote a list that looked like a grocery trip for the stubbornly alive. 1. Admission H&P. 2. ER physician note. 3. Serial troponins and EKGs. 4. Prior cath report. 5. Current medlist W/doses and dates. 6. Cardiologist letter medical necessity. 7. Nursing notes describing symptoms at rest. He added a final line, time-stamped timeline of events. Latoya returned with a sheet for Ed to sign, the HIPAA authorization. He steadied the page with the edge of his palm, cheeks pinched against the tug of the monitor stickers. He signed slowly, as if the pen were heavy. You're my voice, he said, not looking up. I pressed the paper flat where the ink had raised it. I'll use it, I said. By late afternoon, the second denial arrived by portal and by fax because bad news likes to be thorough. It restated the morning's reasons and offered us mercy in the shape of a clock, UI. Julia taped. And the L. I, Mark C. I filled a manila folder with our life in squares and lines, lab values and pulses, dates and doses. Notes that said shortness of breath at rest, like the breath itself could be a witness. On the front I wrote laws in letters. Ed slept in the long, shallow way sick men sleep when they don't want to abandon their posts. I brushed a curl from his forehead and thought about all the times I had written his name, on wedding invitations, on school contact forms, on Christmas cards, and how this signature on this day felt like another kind of vow. Before evening rounds, the medical records office called back. We've pulled the ER packet, the admission H&P, and the EKG tracings, the woman said. Radiology is burning the cath images to a disk. If your appeal is urgent, you can pick up a partial set in an hour and the rest in the morning. I'll be there, I said. I hung up and stood for a moment with my hand on the receiver, feeling the thrum of the hospital in my palm, the beeps and footsteps, the whispers and wheels. The way a building learns to carry the weight of too much. They wanted documentation. We would give them a ledger of everything this heart had tried and everything it could still do if only they would let it. Claire? Ed murmured, eyes half open. Yes, tell me something good. I kissed his knuckles. We have a plan, I said. And a pen? Two clocks still ticked, one clinical, one bureaucratic. I chose the one that measured love by pages and persistence, and then I went to make copies. Hospitals sleep with one eye open. By evening, the halls had the hush of a church between services, but behind doors, the machines kept their vigils. I left Ed with Julia's hand on his and Latoya's promise to hover close, then followed the signs to medical records the way a pilgrim follows candles. A woman with a headset and kind eyes met me at a window made of smudged plexiglass. Lawson? She asked, and I nodded. She slid a folder beneath the slot, ER packet, admission H&P, serial EKGs, and a claim check for the rest. Cath images, radiology burning to disk, troponins printing. Nursing notes pulling now. Thank you, I said, because gratitude lubricates stubborn cogs. Back in Ed's room, I spread the papers across the rolling tray as if I were laying out puzzle pieces that might make a boat. Julia turned to a fresh page in her spiral and drew a table of contents in a teacher's hand. Timeline of events. Clinical summary, plain English. Physician letter of medical necessity. EKG and troponin trends, prior cath report and imaging. Medication history and pharmacy fill records. Risk factors and contraindications. Plan citations and appeal rights. Attachments list with page counts. Give them our story, she said, and then give them no place to set it down. Mark appeared with a plastic bag from the pharmacy, printouts of Dad's fills going back a year. Aspirin, high-dose statin, beta blocker, nitrates, ACE inhibitor. Dates, doses, refill intervals, all the everyday proof that he had done his part. They stamped it with the store's seal, Mark said, as if the ink itself might argue for us. Dr. Patel returned with a single-page letter he'd typed and signed, his name a steady underline beneath an unsteady day. To whom it may concern. Mr. Edward Lawson, 68, presence with unstable angina, rising troponins 0. 09 right arrow 0. 18, dynamic ST depressions in the anterior leads and known LAD stenosis. He remains symptomatic at rest despite optimal medical therapy. Exercise stress testing is contraindicated in unstable angina. Per established cardiology guidelines, early invasive strategy with revascularization when feasible is recommended. Delaying intervention materially increases the risk of myocardial infarction and death. I am requesting urgent approval for PCI CPT 92928 with standby cab if warranted. He looked at me. I avoided alphabet soup, he said. Enough science to stand, enough English to be felt. I built the timeline of events the way you build a fire. Small kindling first, then larger truths. April, July, increasing exertional chest pressure. August, stress test requested, scheduling delay, symptoms briefly improved. Last 72 hours, pain at rest, nitro relief incomplete. Yesterday 5:40 p.m., ER arrival, EKG changes noted. 6:15 p.m., first troponin 0. 09. 8:10 p.m. Denial issued by utilization management. 8:30 a.m. today, peer-to-peer, denial upheld. 12:05 p.m. Second level review, denial upheld. Now, unstable symptoms under observation, risk rising. Julia typed as I spoke, her fingers finding the rhythm of urgency without losing the grammar of grace. At the top of page 1, I wrote the heading as if titles could knock on locked doors. Urgent appeal, life-threatening denial. Member Edward Lawson, ID. Plan, health benefit plan. Case hash, 2147. Request, immediate authorization for PCI CPT 92928 with possible CAB CPT 33533 et al. Then the executive summary, plain and human. Mr. Lawson is a 68-year-old husband, father, and grandfather presenting with unstable angina and objective evidence of ongoing ischemia. He remains symptomatic at rest despite prescribed medications. Exercise stress testing is unsafe in this condition. His treating cardiologist recommends urgent revascularization. We request reversal of the denial today. Each hour increases risk. Mark called the number on the denial for appeals urgent. On hold, he mouthed the song along, an automatic kindness you learn in supermarkets and long lines, and asked for names, case numbers, reference codes. He wrote each down. Paper remembers what panic forgets. Latoya slipped in with another stack, nursing notes describing Ed's pain at 1:12 a.m., 3:46 a.m., 6:20 a.m. Pain at rest radiates to left arm, relief partial with nitro. Notes are a hospital's memory. We would borrow it. I added a section labeled contraindications and common sense. Unstable angina, right arrow, exercise stress testing contraindicated. Symptoms at rest despite therapy, right arrow, failed medical management. Rising troponins, dynamic EKG changes, right arrow, evidence of active ischemia. Delays escalate risk of MI and mortality. Intervention within 48 hours significantly reduces that risk. Add the out-of-pocket max, Mark said softly, as if money were obscene in a room like this, and yet somehow the native language of those we were addressing. Show we're not arguing to avoid cost. We're arguing to keep dad alive. I wrote, financial context, deductible met, out-of-pocket max $9,000, not a barrier to care. This appeal is clinical, not financial. We labeled a manila folder Lawson, appeal master, and fed it our life page by page. Julia affixed color tabs like a librarian at a fire sale. Dr. Patel initialed the bottom of every page the way pilots check per flight. Mark checked fax numbers twice. Radiology called. The disc was ready. Mark jogged to pick it up and returned holding the small plastic case like an organ being transported. All caution, all shoulders. We slid the CD into a sleeve, printed the cover image capture, the artery like a road narrowed to a mean one lane, and added it under imaging. I wrote the final paragraph the way you write to someone who once loved a thing you love and forgot. Delaying revascularization in Mr. Lawson's condition is not conservative, it is dangerous. The plan's criteria, applied without regard to his current instability, create a barrier to care that medicine and decency cannot defend. We ask you to see the patient, not just the policy. We signed the letter, me as authorized representative, HIPAA on file, Dr. Patel as treating cardiologist. I added phone numbers that rang to real people and real hands. Then we sent it into the maze. Mark fed the fax, and the machine answered with that old, stubborn song, dial, hiss, handshake, before stamping OK on a small corner of the page like a shy blessing. We uploaded the packet to the plan's secure portal, file name sober and exact, Lawson Urgent Appeal Packet, PDF Lawson Letter of Medical Necessity, PDF Lawson Cath Images, zip. We emailed appeals with the subject line of flare, urgent, life-threatening denial, Lawson. Edward case 2147, 72-hour appeal. I called to confirm receipt and asked for name that could be held accountable. Tiffany, the voice said, and I wrote Tiffany 3:19 p.m. Confirmed receipt escalated to medical director. Outside the window, the sky had found that color hospitals favor in late afternoon, too bright to be kind, too dim to be honest. Ed dozed. Julia sorted. Mark checked his alarms again. As if time could be asked to behave. Dr. Patel stood at the foot of the bed and tapped the chart with 2 fingers. We've given them what they say they need, he said. Now we make sure they see it. How long? I asked. Urgent appeals move fastest when there's nowhere for them to hide, he said. But they are very good at hiding. Latoya reappeared with a styrofoam cup and a smile that broke rules. Sweet tea, she said. Sugar helps paper go down. I took a sip and felt my throat loosen. Thank you, I said. She glanced at the stack, at my tabs and titles and underlines. That's a mother's handwriting, she said. Looks like a prayer someone could read. I sat beside Ed and placed the finished packet on the bedside tray like a talisman. It was 5 pages of letter and more pages of proof, and then a mountain of what love looks like when it has to speak bureaucracy. 2 clocks still argued. one medical, one administrative. We had pushed both with everything we had codes and numbers, names and needs, the plain fact of a man's hand in mine. Now the appeal was out there, blinking on a screen in a building we'd never see, sitting in an inbox between a meeting invite and a lunch order. I imagined someone, Tiffany, or a cardiologist who goes by a letter, opening it, reading past the acronyms, and remembering that hearts do not file themselves. We waited for the phone to ring, and I began to wonder what we would do if it didn't. By dusk, the appeal sat somewhere inside a server farm, humming among birthday reminders and shipping notices. Ed slept, then didn't, the way pain makes its own schedule. The monitor kept tossing us a lifeline of green, and we kept catching it with our eyes. The hospital phone rang at 6:07. Dr. Patel answered. I watched his jaw learn the news before the rest of his face did. Understood, he said finally, and the word looked too small for his mouth. He hung up and pulled the curtain a fraction closed, as if a sliver of privacy might blunt the blow. The medical director reviewed our packet, he told us. They're maintaining the denial pending additional non-invasive testing. Julia blinked, testing he can't safely do. Yes, what is the timeline? I asked. 72 hours, he said. They'll issue a final internal determination within that window. We don't have that window, I said. I know, he said, and there was a tired kindness in it that made me want to break a chair and also hug him. I'll keep him on heparin, we'll watch him like hawks. Latoya appeared with the sixth sense nurses have for bad news. She adjusted the cuff, the pillow, the little things you fix when you can't fix the big thing. We got you, she said to Ed and then to me, and we got you getting them. At 7, a woman from utilization review came by, pressed and courteous. Mrs. Lawson, I need to explain our status, she said, holding a clipboard like a shield. Mr. Lawson is here under observation. Without authorization for intervention or inpatient admission, the plan may not cover additional nights. We can appeal, but if the denial stands, you could be responsible for certain charges. There are sentences that should be illegal in rooms full of beeping. I stared at the ink. If we sign discharge and he has a heart attack at home, I asked, who's responsible for that? She exhaled. I'm required to discuss financial liability, she said softly. I am not required to be unkind. Do what keeps him safe. We'll document accordingly. After she left, Mark sank into the visitor chair with the posture of a man trying to fold himself into a brochure. We can borrow, he said. I can take a 401k loan. I can ask the bank about a line of credit. I'll sell the truck. Mark, I began. We can't keep him here on a technicality, he said, frantic now. If the system won't move, we move around it. Julia rubbed her temples. Crowdfunding, she said. People do it every day. We put up his photo, we write the story. We'll reach our goal by morning. I looked at my children, grown, good, ready to fling themselves into a fire I hadn't lit. Love will do that to you if you let it. No, I said. Two faces turned to me, wounded by a word I've used mostly to keep toddlers from eating pennies. We will not turn your father's life into a yard sale, I said, gently but the way you close a gate. We will not borrow ourselves into another emergency, and we will not ask strangers to pay for what his doctor is recommending and his plan is dodging. We will ask the plan to see the man, and if they won't, we will introduce them to the neighborhood. Julia's eyes sharpened. Mom, I brought the appeal packet closer, as if proximity could stiffen my spine. We've done the part with paper, I said. Now we do the part with light. Public? Mark asked. Public, I said. Before we posted anything, I did the only thing that lets me sleep through righteous anger. I made a list. What we can share. His first name, his age, the basic diagnosis, the fact of a denial, the risk of delay, the timeline, the codes on the letter, the lines that say not medically necessary. What we won't. Chart photos with identifiers, his social security number, anything that makes him small. I asked Dr. Patel, because good people ask permission even when they're furious. If I describe his condition in plain language, I said, if I quote your letter without your signature. You may, he said. Don't post the films, describe them, and say the words unstable angina. People need to hear that. He went back to his notes, and I wondered how many times he'd watched families pivot from patients to petitioners. In the hallway, my phone buzzed. A reply from Appeals urgent. We acknowledge receipt. Your appeal will be reviewed within 72 hours. It read like a stopwatch talking to a metronome. Julia opened her laptop. We need a headline, she said. She looked at me the way she used to when she brought me book reports to admire. Short, true. Our plan says my husband's heart isn't medically necessary, I said. She nodded. Subhead, we have 48 hours. They want 72. Mark hovered. Anxious and useful. Tag local news, he said. That station that did the segment on insulin rationing, and the consumer reporter, you know, the one who fights with airlines on the air. Hashtag, Julia asked. I wrote it on the corner of my notebook as if naming a ship. Hash let him breathe. We drafted in the language of neighbors, not plaintiffs. This is my husband, Ed. He is 68. He built swing sets and tomato trellises and a life with me for 39 years. Yesterday, his cardiologist said he needs an urgent procedure to open a blocked artery. Our health plan said denied, not medically necessary. They want a stress test he can't safely do. We have 48 hours before his risk triples. They have 72 hours to decide our appeal. Please help us ask them to see the person in their policy. We attached the denial letter with our personal details blacked out, Dr. Patel's letter without his signature block, the timetable with times. We added the estimated cost, $180,000, and the out-of-pocket max, $9,000, so no one could accuse us of trying to dodge our share. Before we posted, I called the number on the back of the plan card one more time because decency demands a last attempt at quiet remedies. This is an urgent appeal in progress, I said. A life safety issue. If there is any additional documentation you require, tell me now and I will get it. A kind voice with a script asked me to wait. Another voice came on, also kind, also scripted, and gave me the same window, the same phrases, the same promises made of air. We will expedite where possible, she said. We understand your concern. Do you? I said and heard my voice go thin the way wire goes thin right before it snaps. I hung up and looked at Ed. He had that look men get when they know they should be fixing the thing and the thing is them. Claire, he said, and in that one syllable asked me to be both soft and iron. I moved his hand to my cheek. You rest, I said. I'll make a fuss. At 8:50, the hospital smells like bleach and cooked carrots. At 8:51, I opened the camera on my phone. Hi, I began, and heard my voice as other people would, which is always embarrassing and sometimes exactly right. My name is Claire Lawson. I am speaking because my husband can't right now, and because I think if more of us spoke, fewer of us would have to. I kept it simple. I said his first name. I said our years. I said the doctor's words and then the plans. I said, if we don't operate within 48 hours, his risk of dying triples. I held up the letter, the line with denied, not medically necessary in black and white. I said the phrase the letter loved, medical necessity, and the one it forgot, human being. I tagged the station. I tagged the reporter with the airline fights. I tagged the hospital because kindness should be named in the same sentence as the problem. I tagged the plan. I closed with the only prayer I know how to pray in public. Please help us ask them to see him. Julia hit post. Mark posted the same to his accounts. I sent the link to the email of a health reporter whose byline I'd memorized over years of breakfast reading about people who were not us. For a minute, nothing happened. Then the little hearts began to bloom like stubborn flowers in bad soil. A cousin in Ohio, a former neighbor, one of my students from Sunday school, now a nurse in Arizona. A stranger who wrote, "My dad, same fight, don't give up." Another stranger who said, "I work in appeals. DM me the case number." The world is full of doors. It is also full of people holding them open. At 9:23, my phone buzzed with a message request from a woman with a station logo next to her name. Saw your post. Can we talk tonight? Megan, help desk. I typed back my number with the speed of a mother who has found a match in the dark. 10 minutes later, we were on the phone. She asked careful questions. Can you send your denial with identifiers blacked out? Do you consent to us contacting the plan? Can we speak to your physician on the record? She explained the rules she had to live by, which made me trust her more. We won't out anyone, she said. We will ask about policy. Yes, I said, ask loudly. Latoya caught my eye and tipped her chin toward Ed. He was awake, brown eyes steady. Who's winning? He asked. Us, I said, because we're louder now. He smiled, the left corner of his mouth doing the work of the whole thing. Good, he whispered. Before Megan hung up, she said, I need to ask one thing. Do you know if your plan is fully insured or self-funded? I don't know, I said. Does it matter? It can, she said. Different rules, different referees. I'll circle back. After the call, the room felt both smaller and braver. The packet sat on the tray. The letter stared back at me, still the same, and somehow less so. I reread the line in the appeal reply. We will review within 72 hours. The words hadn't changed. The air around them had. At 10, the unit dimmed to night. Machines adjusted their lullabies. We turned our phones face down and waited for light in a place not famous for it. Claire? Ed said, voice a little stronger, or maybe I was hearing it better. Yes, you did good. Not yet, I said, but I'm not done. I settled into the chair, our children on either side, the three of us a kind of scaffolding. Outside our door, the hospital went on blessing and breaking in equal measure. At 10:30, the post crossed 100,000 views. At 10:31, a private message arrived from an email address that ended in at bluesmithhealth. Calm. We're looking into this, it said. Somewhere, a door that had been very sure it was a wall remembered its hinges. By midnight, the post had become a small campfire people found in the dark. Old neighbors stepped into the circle. A former student wrote, he taught me to use a hammer without fear. A nurse from Tucson typed, unstable angina, stress test contraindicated, keep pushing. Strangers said, my mother, my brother, me. The internet gets called cruel, sometimes it is a porch light. At 12:17 a.m., the health desk reporter Megan texted, we can be at the hospital at 7 a.m., B-roll only. No lights, just your words. I asked Dr. Pytel if a camera outside the door would disturb the floor. If it moves a mountain, he said, we can live with a pebble. Ed slept in those thin strips you ration like sugar. I sat with the appeal packet on my lap and the hospital's clock holding its breath between seconds. Mark dozed in the chair, phone face up on his chest, alarms set like sentries. Julia typed replies to kind strangers and muted the cruel ones with the grace of a teacher who's had practice. At 5:42 a.m., the unit hummed awake. Coffee made its argument. Hall lights learned their manners. Megan arrived with a cameraman who carried his equipment like an apology. She wore flats and a press badge and the expression of someone who has learned not to blink when people cry. We'll keep faces out, she said. We'll blur wristbands. We'll ask the plan for comment. She glanced at our stack. Can we show the denial line? I held up the sentence the way you hold up a torn hem to a seamstress, denied not medically necessary. Show it, I said. Let the words see themselves. Dr. Patel, bone-tired and immaculate, agreed to a quick on-record line in the hall. Unstable angina is not a debate topic, he told her microphone, voice even as a level. Exercise stress testing is dangerous in the state. The evidence and the ethics point the same way. Megan nodded, and I could tell she'd keep that sentence whole. By 8, our post had skipped across the city like a stone, catching every ripple. The station aired a 90-second segment between weather and traffic. It wasn't a takedown, it was a mirror. They blurred Ed's face, showed my hands holding the letter, and let the beeps do their quiet sermon. They ended with the statistics doctor. Patel hated but had to say out loud, if we don't operate within 48 hours, his risk of dying can triple. At 8:37 a.m., my phone pinged with an email from an address at Bluesmithhealth. Calm, we take these concerns seriously. Please know the plan is reviewing the urgent appeal. It was the kind of note you send to prove you sent a note. At 9:05, another ping, this time from a patient advocacy group whose name I recognized from stories I never thought would be ours. We can walk you through ERISA rights and external review if eligible. Want a quick call? I dialed. A woman named Denise answered with a voice like a warm coat. She didn't promise outcomes. She promised instructions. Get the case file, she said. Ask for the clinical criteria used. Confirm whether your plan is self-funded or fully insured. It changes who the grown-ups are in the room. Self-funded? I repeated, tasting a new alphabet. Many employers pay claims themselves, she said. The insurer is just the administrator. If that's your situation, the decision makers sit at your son's company, not the logo on the card. I looked at Mark. He'd been listening with the polite horror of a man who has just discovered the storm is not only outside. HR said the plan administrator is Blue Summit, he said. Plans often say that, Denise replied gently. Then the fine print says otherwise. Check the summary plan description again. Look for the words the plan is self-funded or claims administered on behalf of the plan and the phrase plan administrator. That's usually a person at the employer. I opened the PDF on my phone and pinched and scrolled with the fingers of a woman who wants a map to cough up treasure. There it was in small letters like a dare I'd walked past all year. Claims are administered by Blue Summit Health on behalf of the company health benefit plan. 3 pages later, a line we had skimmed, the plan administrator is Company S Benefits Committee. I felt the shift in my stomach, the way a fairy notice makes you aware there's water under your feet. At 10:14, Megan called. We asked Blue Summit for comment, she said. They sent a statement, privacy, process, compassion. We also asked your son's company if the plan is self-funded. Their PR replied, we do not comment on individual employee health matters. We didn't ask about an individual, we asked about the plan. Ask again, I said, and heard how hard my voice had become overnight. I will, she said. Also, off the record for now, someone forwarded me an internal email. The subject line is your case. The line that matters says, this is a self-funded plan. Loop legal and plan administrator before responding. The tiles under my shoes went very still. Can you share it? I asked. Not yet, she said, but I will use what I can. At noon, a petition Julia's friend had started quietly crossed 5,000 signatures. The comments were little biographies. Former claims nurse, peer-to-peer is not a rubber stamp. Cardiology tech, unstable angina is a fire alarm. Widow, this nearly killed my husband, don't wait. People offered themselves as corroboration. It felt like being carried across a river by neighbors. Blue Summit sent another email. We are expediting the review. We appreciate your patience. Patience is a gift you give of your own free will. I had none left to lend. Mark's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, frowned, and stepped into the hall. When he returned, his face had the color you get when the world moves under you, but you must pretend you expected it. Mom, he said quietly, that was my manager. He saw the segment. He said there's concern about me posting about the plan. He suggested I take the post down. And what did you say? I asked. I said if they want me to stop telling the truth about my father's heart, they can authorize the procedure and I'll post the happy ending, he said, voice steadying as it spoke. He sat, stared at his hands. I like my job. I like your father, I said. Sometimes we are not called to choose. Sometimes life is rude and demands it. At 2, Megan texted again. Segment picked up national. Another station wants the package. An advocacy lawyer messaged to say, ask for the plan's medical policy they used. They often cite a guideline that doesn't match the patient's condition. I added a new tab to our binder, policies and criteria. By 3, the hospital had become a newsroom. A second camera crew appeared, was shooed politely by a charge nurse, and filmed me in a corner outside a supply closet where the mops stood like soldiers. I told the same story I'd been telling all day, in the same words, because the truth doesn't need synonyms to be persuasive. Blue Summit's third message arrived at 3:27. We have escalated to our medical director. Decision within 72 hours per policy. They kept saying per policy the way a priest says amen to close a door. At 4, the patient group emailed a template labeled U.S. Department of Labor, EBSA complaint draft with blanks for names and numbers. We can file if the appeal is mishandled, Denise wrote. But sometimes the whisper that you know this form exists does the job. I printed it. Paper makes whispers louder. Ed woke, clearer than he'd been all day. How's the weather? He asked, because men in hospitals talk about weather to remind themselves there's a sky. Windy, I said, in our favor. He squeezed my fingers, then closed his eyes again, trusting me to steer. At 5, a message slid into my inbox from a generic address at Mark's company, the kind that begins with do not reply at. It was a newsletter I normally skim, benefits updates, wellness challenges, a photo of a walkathon. I was about to trash it when a subhead snagged me, understanding your health plan structure. Two paragraphs down, an innocent line. Our health plan is self-funded. Blue Summit Health administers claims on our behalf. The sentence sat in the middle of a cheerful layout like a confession delivered with a smile. I forwarded it to Megan with one sentence. You asked if it matters. It does? At 6, the station aired a longer piece. They'd stitched Dr. Pytel's com with Latoya's hands with the letter's ugliest sentence. They'd called Blue Summit again, and this time the statement included one new line. For self-funded plans, the employer is the ultimate decision maker regarding medical necessity. I watched the words travel across the chyron like a flock of black birds. Mark stared at the screen. He looked both relieved and accused. So it is them, he said, not a question, a geography. I put my hand on the back of his neck the way I used to when fevers ran high. Then tomorrow, I said, we stop talking to walls and go knock on the door that actually has hinges. He nodded, swallowed, and nodded again. Night learned our names. The unit dimmed. The beeps kept their patient faith. Somewhere downtown, a PR person wrote a sentence with too many commas. Somewhere else, a lawyer printed our appeal and underlined a line she could live with. In the room, I sat with the man I love and the children we made and felt the floor tilt toward morning. My phone buzzed once more, a subject line forwarded from Megan, the way a secret clears its throat. Lawson case, media inquiry. This is a self-funded plan. Loop legal and plan administrator before responding. And there it was, the string tied to the curtain. Tomorrow I would pull. Morning came in sheets of pale light, the kind that makes even hospital paint look honest. A volunteer rolled by with cranberry juice and graham crackers, the communion of the unwell. Ed slept with his mouth slightly open, a habit from the old days when he'd nap after mowing the lawn. The monitor traced its green cursive across the screen, writing his name over and over in a language only machines and wives learn to read. I reopened the summary plan description on my phone and searched like a woman looking for a spare key under a mat. There it was, small, polite, and devastatingly clear. Claims are administered by Blue Summit Health on behalf of the company health benefit plan. The plan administrator is the company benefits committee. On another page, a different kind of promise. The plan administrator is a fiduciary under ERISA. I circled the word with my finger against the glass as if I could smudge it into something binding. I called Denise at the patient advocacy group. It's self-funded, I said. Plan administrator is a benefits committee. Good, she said, in the way generals say good about bridges. That means there are names attached to decisions. ERISA Section 404, duty of loyalty and prudence. They must act in the best interest of plan participants. Claim and appeal rules live at 29C. F.R. Section 2560. 503-1, full and fair review expedited for urgent care. Ask who the fiduciaries are. Ask if they consulted an appropriate healthcare professional. Ask for the criteria they used. I wrote the phrases down the way you copy a recipe you'll make once and never forget. 404. Prudence. Loyalty. Full and fair review. Urgent care. Appropriate professional. Criteria. And ask if the plan is grandfathered, she added. If it isn't, they owe you an external review by an independent reviewer. Different referee. Sometimes that's all it takes. Grandfathered, I asked. Plans that haven't changed much since the Affordable Care Act, she said. If they aren't, federal external review applies, even for self-funded plans. Don't let anyone hide behind the logo. The employer carries the duty. I thanked her and hung up. Then I did what old teachers do when the world gets noisy. I made a lesson plan for a meeting that didn't exist yet. Call sheet company. Confirm self-funded status. We have newsletter. Identify plan administrator, benefits committee, and attending fiduciary. Present dossier, clinical urgency, contraindications for stress test, troponins, prior cath meds. Cite ERISA Section 404 and 29C FR Section 2560. 503-1 Urgent Care Full and Fair Review. Ask, did you consult an appropriate health professional? Which criteria? Send policy document. Ask, grandfathered? If not, trigger external review immediately. Offer solution, temporary authorization for PCI at Medicare rates pending final review. Explain risk, DOL/EBSA complaint drafted. Media interest, potential class exposure if criteria misapplied. Deadline today. Mark's phone chimed, an email from HR, carefully worded, very bright. We're concerned about privacy and tone on social media. Let's connect this morning at 9:30 to discuss resources available to you. He read it twice, as if a second reading might reveal the hidden map. Resources, he said. Does that mean help? It means they saw the news, I said, and it means you have their attention. Dr. Patel rounded at 7. He's stable-ish, he said, eyebrows frank. I don't love ish. He placed his palm on Ed's shoulder, a physician's benediction. If a window opens, we go through it. Doctor, I asked, if the plan administrator wanted to speak with you directly on the record as the treating cardiologist, would you take that call? In a heartbeat, he said, and then caught himself and winced. Forgive the metaphor. Latoya came next with fresh pillowcases and a gaze that will not be crossed. You going hunting? She asked, nodding at my tabbed binder. I'm going knocking, I said, on the door that actually opens. She smoothed the sheet. Take your mama voice, she said, the one kids listen to the first time. At 8:55, we stepped into a family room the size of a waiting area and the shape of a confession. Julia dialed the HR number and put it on speaker. A woman named Carla came on the line with the tone of someone who has weathered storms without losing her umbrella. Mark, thanks for hopping on, she began. We saw the segment. We want to support your family in navigating the process. For privacy, we can't discuss details. Carla, I said, and my voice made both my children glance at me. This is Claire. May I ask a few factual questions about the plan? There was a pause, a small intake of corporate breath. We can discuss general plan information, she said carefully. Is your health plan self-funded? I asked. Yes, she said. And who is the plan administrator? The benefits committee, she said. Why do you ask? Because your plan denied a medically urgent procedure in a way that contradicts the treating cardiologist and common sense, I said. The vendor says they administer claims on your behalf. Your own newsletter confirms that. As plan administrator, you carry fiduciary duty under ERISA to act in the best interest of plan participants. We will be filing our urgent appeal under the Federal Claims Regulation 29C, FR Section 2560. 503-1. We would like to meet today with the fiduciary or their delegate to present the clinical record and request temporary authorization pending review. Another pause. This one had weight. I'll loop in benefits and legal, she said. Can you come to the office at noon? Yes, I said, and wrote noon in block letters big enough to see from across a life. Please bring your documentation, she added. We'll bring ours. After we hung up, Mark set the phone down like a man who had been carrying a glass statue since yesterday. I don't know if I should be in that room, he said. You should, I said. You're a son and a participant, and this is your company, but if they make you choose, you leave. I've lived long enough to make that choice for both of us. Julia began printing copies from the family room's public terminal, feeding the tray paper the way you feed a nervous animal. Steady, patient, kind. She labeled sets with sticky notes, plan, medical, letters, policy, media, and tucked the EBSA complaint draft on the bottom like a thundercloud. Megan texted, we can station a camera outside the building. No ambushes, just presence. I stared at the message and thought of all the times a simple witness changed a story. Yes, I wrote back, quiet presence. Before we left, I stood by Ed's bed and smoothed his hair the way I did when the kids were small and feverish, promising them in that wordless way mothers do that I would be back and I would not come empty-handed. His eyes fluttered open. Field trip, he whispered. Conference, I said. I'll bring minutes. Bring authorization, he said, and smiled, the old mischief finding a chair at the edge of his pain. We signed in at the corporate lobby under lights meant to flatter furniture. The receptionist wore kindness like a blazer. Conference room C, she said. 8th floor, they're expecting you. The elevator smelled faintly of lemon and ambition. Mark stared at his shoes. Julia held the binder to her chest like a hymnal. I watched the numbers climb and thought about how many mornings that building had measured achievement by different numbers: sales, margins, shares, and how today it would be asked to count something else. Conference Room C had a view of a river the city pretends is always blue. A man in a navy suit introduced himself as David Harper, chief financial officer and chair of the benefits committee. With him sat an HR director with a pad, a lawyer with a laptop, and a woman from Blue Summit who brought a smile and a binder of her own. "Mrs. Lawson," the CFO said. "Mark, Julia, we're sorry for what your family is experiencing. We want to understand." "Understanding is a good start," I said, placing our dossier on the table and sliding copies toward each seat. "Approval is better." The lawyer began with disclaimers. The Blue Summit representative began with process. The HR director began with empathy. The CFO began with numbers, utilization trends, medical cost inflation, the duty to steward the plan for all employees. I let them finish the overture because good manners are a kind of weapon if you keep them sharp. Then I began. "This is my husband," I said, tapping the first page where Edward Lawson was printed under member as if that made him less than the man in the bed. "He is 68, with unstable angina, rising troponins, dynamic EKG changes, a known LAD lesion. Exercise stress testing is contraindicated. He is symptomatic at rest despite optimal medical therapy. Your vendor denied an urgent intervention because he lacks a recent stress test and 90 days of documented medication failure in the right format. The denial ignores both medicine and your fiduciary duty." I slid Dr. Patel's letter across. The CFO read it the way some men read recipes: curious, skeptical, a little hungry. The lawyer looked at the citations and began typing. "You carry ERISA fiduciary obligations." I continued, turning to the page I had marked with two tabs, one for law, one for mercy. "Section 404 says you must act solely in the interest of participants with the care, skill, prudence, and diligence of a prudent person." The Federal Claims Rule, 29C, F.R. Section 2560. 503-1 requires a full and fair review and specific procedures for urgent care claims. Has your plan consulted an appropriate healthcare professional in cardiology on this file? If so, who? And did they review the actual clinical record we provided? The Blue Summit rep cleared her throat. "Our medical director." "Your medical director told our cardiologist he needed a treadmill stress test," I said, "on a man with unstable angina. Do you understand what that means? It means ask the heart to sprint so you can decide whether to treat the heart that can't walk." The room went quiet in the useful way. "We are asking for one of two reasonable outcomes," I said, letting the words sit, then stand. "Approve the intervention today or authorize temporarily at Medicare rates pending external review. If your plan is non-grandfathered, we will request an independent external review immediately. Either way, the procedure cannot wait. Your own vendor is bound by your instructions. Write better ones." The lawyer looked up. "We will need time to." "You have had 72 hours by your policy clock," I said. His clinical clock reads 48 before his risk multiplies. We are at the intersection where clocks decide who we are. The CFO glanced at the river, then back at the paper, then at me. He was a man used to pushing decimals into neat lines and watching maps change color. "If we approve and something goes wrong." "If you don't approve and something goes wrong," I said, "you will have to live with a different kind of line." He folded his hands. They were steady, the way men's hands stay steady when their minds are sprinting. "We'll confer," he said. "Can you give us an hour?" "We can give you lunch," I said. "We can't give you time we don't have." He nodded at the Blue Summit rep. "Let's step out." They filed into the hallway, a small migration of authority. Through the glass, I could see their shapes bend toward each other. Arguments don't need words when everyone knows the stakes. Julia exhaled. Mark rubbed his jaw. I stared at the empty chairs and thought how strange it is that furniture can remember the weight of a decision. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Megan: "We're downstairs, no rush, just here." I typed back: "We asked the right people. Now we'll see who they are." The door opened. The CFO returned with the lawyer and the HR director. the Blue Summit rep lingered, then followed, binder hugged to her like a shield. "Mrs. Lawson," he said, and I hated that his voice was kind because it made me want to forgive him before I knew what I was forgiving. "We're prepared to make a determination. I didn't breathe on purpose. Breathing invites disappointment. We will," he began, and that is where time did its old trick and slowed enough for me to see the bones of the moment. A table, a river, a stack of pages that looked like homework and felt like a life. Somewhere 8 floors below, a camera waited without hurry. Somewhere across town, a heart monitor kept writing our name. "We will authorize a temporary approval for PCI today, at a rate indexed to Medicare, pending completion of our internal review," he said. "We will also initiate an external review through our independent reviewer. Dr. Patel may proceed." I closed my eyes, opened them, and found the room still here. "Put it in writing," I said, because joy can be practical, "and copy the hospital." The lawyer slid a document across the table with a speed that told me printers had been purring while we spoke. The words were in the place where promises try to become facts. I read them. I found the verbs. I nodded. Outside, the river acted like it had always been this blue. We left conference room C with the kind of silence you carry out of a chapel. Downstairs, Megan lifted a hand but didn't aim a question at us. Presence was enough. The elevator doors closed. In the reflection, I saw 3 faces I knew and 3 people I hadn't met until this week. By the time we reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. From Benefits Committee at Subject, Temporary Authorization, Lawson. I opened it with the reverence reserved for letters that change rooms. Authorization, approved temporary. Service, percutaneous coronary intervention, CPT 92928. Inpatient admission as necessary, CAB CPT 33533 et al. If clinically indicated. Diagnosis, unstable angina, ICT 10 I-20. 0 with NSTEMI, I-21. 4. Rate, index to Medicare pending internal and external review. Valid, 5 calendar days from issue. Auth hash 047. Notes, external review initiated with independent review organization. Treating cardiologist may proceed. 5 days, Julia said, exhaling like someone stepping back from a cliff. Today is day 1. I forwarded it to Dr. Patel and the hospital utilization office. Then I called Latoya on the unit desk because there are people you tell before anyone else. "We have authorization," I said. A beat, and then the brightness in her voice you can hear even through drywall. "Baby, we've been setting the room like we believed." When we walked back into Ed's room, Dr. Patel was already there, holding a printed copy of the authorization the way surgeons hold anything that isn't a scalpel, respectfully, a little impatiently. "Cath lab has a slot at 2:15, he said. "We'll aim for stents. If the anatomy insists, cardiac surgery is on standby for bypass. I want him NPO now. We'll adjust the heparin. Consent forms in 10. Consent is the strangest grammar, future tense written beside worst-case verbs. He sat on the edge of the bed and did the thing doctors do when they respect you. He told the truth without hedging. "Here are the risks we discuss every day because we must," he said. "Bleeding, stroke, kidney injury, arrhythmia, unforeseen complications. The benefits, restore flow, reduce risk. If we do this, your odds get better by a lot. If we don't, the math is unkind." Ed listened like a man who has fixed enough things to recognize a tool when he sees one. "Let's fix it," he said. He signed his name in slow loops. I initialed the places where spouses initial to say, "I understand, I understand, I understand," even when understanding is a moving target. Mark stepped into the hall to take a call. He came back with his shoulders 2 inches lower. "HR said to take the time I need," he said. "FMLA paperwork in my inbox," and he swallowed. Carla asked if Dad would mind if the company used this to review how urgent claims get handled. She sounded like she meant it. "Tell her your mother insists," I said. The Blue Summit rep emailed a second note, clipped and proper. "Internal review continues. External reviewer assigned. Please upload any additional clinical updates." I uploaded nothing but the sentence procedure scheduled for today at 2:15 p.m. Sometimes brevity is a border. Denise from the patient group called quick and practical. Celebrate later, she said. Right now, photograph the authorization, the timestamp, the names. If anything goes sideways with billing, this email becomes a life raft. And consider filing a courtesy notice with EBSA anyway. No blame, just data. Cases like this teach systems. I will, I said, saving the PDF in 3 places and a fourth just in case. At noon, a hospital chaplain paused in the doorway like someone taught not to enter uninvited. Would you like me to sit? She asked. She didn't say pray, she said sit. We said yes. She watched the monitor like we'd been watching it and breathed in the rhythm we'd learned. When she left, she touched Ed's ankle through the blanket, just enough to say, I'm human too. Nurses converged with a choreography that looked like grace disguised as checklists. Latoya scanned his bracelet, read his name out loud, asked for his birthday, checked it against the band as if identity is the first medicine you give a person. Another nurse clipped his wedding ring to a tiny zip-top bag and wrote Lawson, our room in loopy capitals. It'll be here waiting, she promised, and I believed her. Julia tucked the manila appeal master folder into my tote as if it were a talisman we might need to show to a door that forgot it already opened. I slid the authorization on top, printed and highlighted, the way first-time travelers keep passports too close to the body. Dr. Patel returned with the anesthesiologist, a woman with eyes that smiled over her mask. She spoke in the calm of someone who lives at altitude. We'll monitor closely, she said. You'll hear jargon because jargon keeps planes in the sky. Ask if you want translation. Otherwise, hold hands and let us fly the thing. At 1:47, the cardiology fellow stuck his head in. Cath lab ready, he said. Transport in 3. We kissed Ed's forehead, left, right, center the way we always do before trips, big or small. He looked at each of us like men look at the reason they worked overtime for 3 decades. Back soon, he said. I nodded like a promise is a key you turn with your chin. Orderlies unlocked the bed, unplugged the cords, tucked lines and dignity with equal care. The hallway made a straight invitation to an elevator I hadn't noticed until it opened its mouth just for us. In the family area outside the lab, the air felt cooler, the way theaters feel just before the lights go down. A board on the wall listed cases by numbers, not names, and our number blinked from pre-op to in procedure with the quiet drama of a sunrise. Julia squeezed my hand. Mark rubbed circles on his knee the way he used to rub crayon circles on paper when first-grade math felt like a tide. My phone vibrated, Megan, standing by for update. I sent a photo of the authorization header without numbers and 3 words. They kept duty. The cath lab nurse called on the family phone, crisp and kind. We're starting, she said. Dr. Patel is in. He'll call at the first decision point. I pressed the receiver to my chest for a second, as if I could warm the line the message traveled on. In my tote, paper breathed the way paper does. Quiet, stubborn, patient. A volunteer offered coffee. I took it because accepting help is one way to tell the universe you're still cooperating. The second hand on the wall clock moved like a metronome that had been practicing for this recital its whole life. In my mind, I walked the path we'd taken to this chair. The denial in a glass voice, the letter with its polite refusal, the packet, the camera, the word self-funded like a trapdoor and a staircase, the conference table with a river outside pretending it was always that blue, the sentence we asked for and got. My phone buzzed once more. The hospital portal had pushed a new message, a habit it rarely learned on time. I opened it and stared, not because I needed reassurance, but because some letters you read twice to be grateful properly. Authorization 047. Status, approved. Valid through 5 days. Facility, inpatient, cardiac catheterization lab. Notes, proceed per treating cardiologist. I showed it to Julia and Mark. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Down the hall, a door swung inward, and the orderly who had taken Ed and walked past with the purposeful float of people who know when not to run. The green line on the monitor in my memory kept time. Somewhere beyond a wall, a wire threaded into a stubborn artery, a balloon introduced reason to a narrow place, a stent took up residence like a good tenant. I closed my eyes and let the numbers do their work for a while. Then the family phone rang again. The family phone rang, and the three of us moved as one. Julia snatched it first, nodded, and put it on speaker. "This is Tina in the cath lab," the voice said, calm, quick, working. "We're in. Culprit is the proximal LAD. Doctor, Patel thinks he can cross it. Balloon going up. There are sentences you never knew you were waiting your whole life to hear. Balloon going up joined our family vocabulary like grace before meals." We stared at the board on the wall, our case number lit in procedure, as if blinking could jinx it. Mark stood, sat, stood again. I folded my hands in my lap the way church taught me when I was 5, though this felt less like asking and more like agreeing. "Yes, please, keep him." 15 minutes, 20, 30. Time stopped being a ruler and became weather. I reread the authorization as if it were a spell that needed steady eyes. Julia scrolled through messages, strangers and cousins, and that Sunday school kid now a nurse in Phoenix, typing quick thank yous, muting the one man who told us to try turmeric. The phone again. "Still Tina," she said, and I loved her like a relative. "Wire is across. First balloon inflated. Good response. We're preparing drug-eluting stents." Mark let out a breath that sounded like a tire finding a road. "Stents," he mouthed, as if saying it aloud could keep surgery waiting in the hallway forever. We went back to our chairs because that is what you do when you cannot do anything else. The second hand made its rounds like a faithful dog. The volunteer asked if we needed crackers. We took them because crackers are a way to say we're still here. Another ring. "Stent 1 deployed," Tina said. "Flow improving, going to place a second more distal. No complications so far." "Tell doctor Patel he's doing great," Julia said, as if surgeons need pep talks and maybe they do. 10 more minutes. The board flickered. I looked at my children and saw all the ages they had ever been, the boy with grass-stained knees, the girl guarding a ladybug in her pocket, as if the waiting had thinned time enough to see its layers. The phone, gentle now, like a hand on a shoulder. "We're done," Tina said. "2 drug-eluting stents in the LAD. Timmy 3 flow. No complications. He's going to recovery. Dr. Patel will call with details." I didn't realize I'd stood until my knees wobbled. Relief comes on like sleep. You don't notice the exact moment, only the mercy that it arrived. Dr. Patel called 5 minutes later. He used words he doesn't throw around lightly. "It went beautifully," he said. "2 stents, 3, 0 and 2, 75, good apposition, good expansion, no dissection, no Nora flow. He'll go to CCU for monitoring overnight. We spared the bypass today." "Thank you," I said, and meant it like diction, each letter pronounced. "Thank you. When you see him, he'll have a band on his wrist," he added. "We went radial, less bleeding. He may be groggy. That's the medicine doing its last good job." "Doctor," I asked, "does it hurt less now?" He paused the way good men do when they choose their answer. "The river that was narrowed is a river again," he said. "Rivers remember." They wheeled Ed into CCU at 4:07, cheeks pinker than the last time I'd memorized them. The TR band on his wrist made a little rainbow of air under a clear cuff. Someone had taped his wedding ring to a plastic bag and written Lawson, our room in marker that bled just enough to look human. Latoya met us at the door with the authority of a woman who has walked 1,000 families to thresholds and back. "He's going to feel like he ran up a hill he didn't remember starting," she said. "But look at that monitor." The green line didn't just behave, it had swagger. Heart rate steady, pressure polite. The machine sang a song with more music than math. Ed opened his eyes, found mine like he always does, like city lights from an airplane window, familiar, necessary. His voice was sanded down to the essential. "Hey, Claire. Hey yourself," I said. "You're very fashionable." I tapped the band on his wrist. He lifted the slightest smile. "Bracelet for boys." "Best kind," I said. The cardiology fellow popped in and gave us the post-op syllabus. "No lifting with the right arm today. No twisting. We keep the band for a few hours, wean the air slowly. He'll pee like a racehorse, that's the dye leaving the building. Aspirin and a P2Y12 inhibitor starting tonight. Telemetry. Tomorrow a walk." "Tomorrow a walk," Ed repeated, as if someone had given him a destination. Dr. Patel came last, as if he knew we would hold his words differently once we'd seen the proof. He pulled up the after image, those ghostly highways, and traced the old narrow place with his finger, then the new bright one. 0 to 5% residual, he said. Full flow, no drama. No drama, I said, and felt a laugh catch in my throat like a hiccup. You speak my love language. He patted my shoulder, then Mark's. You did the hard part, he said. I just do plumbing. Plumbers save houses, Julia said. Sometimes the block is in the second floor bathroom with a view of a river. He smiled. Rest, we keep him, morning labs, then we talk discharge. When he left, I slid Ed's ring back where it belongs. That small circle found its home like it had been waiting in the shadow just off stage for its cue. He turned his hand, admired the way something ordinary can become holy again once you almost lose it. My phone buzzed. Megan, we don't need a camera today, just your words. I typed back 2 stents, full flow, thank you for being kind to the beeps. She sent a heart and a line, we'll follow the policy piece when you're ready. The hospital portal, dutiful now that the crisis had passed, updated. Status, post-PCI, stable. The authorization sat in my email like a quiet guard. Denise texted a list of after things. Document the decision, ask for a written reversal of denial, keep every EOB, consider filing an informational EBSA note so someone counts this story in a pile that tells the truth. I took a picture of Ed's wristband, no names, just the band and our joined hands, and posted a short update to the thread where thousands of kind strangers had spent a day caring about a man they'd never meet. He is okay. 2 stents. Clean flow, the river remembered. If you prayed, thank you. If you called a plan name out loud on our behalf, thank you. We'll tell you what happens next with policy. For tonight, we let him sleep. The comments came in like casseroles on a Midwestern porch, simple, warm, more than we could eat, but exactly what we needed. Evening settled over CCU in the way hospitals teach you to respect. Lights dimmed, voices softened, the chorus of machines switching to lullabies. Julia dozed with her head on her folded arms. Mark stepped out to call Carla and say thank you without politics. Latoya brought me a warm blanket and a look that felt like see? I nodded back like I see. Ed drifted, waking for sips of water, smiling at a joke he didn't bother telling because it wasn't about words anymore. I counted breaths, not because I needed to, but because counting them was a way to acknowledge each one. At 8:13, my phone buzzed with an email from Megan. Off the record for a few hours, but you should know, an internal memo went out at Mark's company, Town Hall Friday. Topic: Urgent medical determinations and plan oversight. She attached a screenshot, the subject line clean and unmistakable. Subject, all hands, health plan oversight and urgent care pathways. I showed it to Mark when he came back. He read it like you read a sign on a highway you've been driving your whole life but never noticed. They're going to talk about it, he said, not triumph, not relief, something steadier, a door with hinges. We'll be ready, I said. I tucked my phone away and looked at my husband's hands. The veins under the skin, like old roads on a well-loved map, now fed again. Somewhere under that band, a river ran as if it had never learned to be narrow. Outside our window, the city practiced sleep. Inside, a monitor wrote his name in green and did not tire of it. Tomorrow, I whispered, because promises are best made softly at the edge of miracles, we make sure this doesn't just save you. By morning, the CCU felt like a house where the storm had finally decided to move on. Ed slept real sleep, the kind that doesn't bargain. The monitor wrote his name in green with a new confidence, like a boy learning cursive and getting proud of the loops. Latoya loosened the band on his wrist, a click of air at a time, and said, "We'll walk after breakfast. Just to the door and back, then to the window, then to the hallway. That's how you teach a river to trust its banks again." At 10, external review answered faster than anyone promised. A message landed in the portal and in my email with the unadorned relief of a good verdict. Independent reviewer determination. Overturn, requested PCI was medically necessary given unstable angina, rising troponins, and contraindication to exercise stress testing. Delay increased risk of MI/mortality. Coverage required under plan terms. The words were simple and enormous. I forwarded the letter to Dr. Pytel, to Blue Summit, to the Benefits Committee, and because kindness should close circles, to Megan at the health desk. 10 minutes later, Blue Summit issued a formal reversal of denial. The temporary authorization became plain old authorization. the kind that doesn't need adjectives. Billing updated. Our share stopped at the out-of-pocket maximum we had already met. The rest flowed to the codes and rates that live on the other side of worry. Ed woke and we told him. He nodded once, a man acknowledging a piece of lumber had finally come level. Good, he said. Let's go to that window. We did, to the door and back, to the window and back, to the hallway and back. He held the Roman four-pole like a gentleman learning a new dance. Nurses cheered, the way people do when they remember that bravery is sometimes 12 feet long and happens in socks. By discharge day, the tomatoes in our backyard had outgrown the cage he'd built for them. Our son promised to tie them up after work. We'll do it together, Ed said, and he said together in a way that made the word heavier than twine. Friday came with the town hall Mark's company had promised. We watched from a small auditorium with bad coffee and honest faces. David Harper, the CFO who had said yes when it counted, stood beside Carla from HR and a woman introduced as the chief medical advisor. They didn't speak like people warding off blame. They spoke like people admitting a house needs a better staircase. Many of you saw the story this week, David said. We are a self-funded plan. That means we are the fiduciaries. When urgent care is at stake, clocks and criteria must serve the person, not the other way around. He clicked through slides that didn't look like PR. They looked like a checklist taped to a nurse's station. A 24-hour fast track for urgent determinations with a cardiology or appropriate specialty, physician reviewing the actual chart, not just a summary. Temporary authorizations at Medicare indexed rates when clinical risk is rising and documentation is in hand, pending full review. Independent physician panel available within hours, not days. Published medical policies and the exact criteria used. In plain language, employees can read without a translator. A direct line for employees and clinicians to reach the plan administrator in urgent cases. Training for benefit staff on ERISA fiduciary duty and the difference between vendor discretion and employer responsibility. Quarterly reporting of urgent case turnaround times and outcomes, anonymized, audited. Carla stepped forward. We will also audit urgent denials from the last 12 months, she said. If any should have been approved, we'll make it right retroactively. A hand went up in the third row, tentative. Are we doing this because we were on TV? A man asked. We're doing this because we were wrong, David said. TV helped us hear it faster. They invited questions. Mark kept his hand down and his shoulders loose. Pride looks different in grown men. Sometimes it is simply the absence of bracing. Afterward, in the hallway, David found us. Mr. Lawson, he said to Ed, I'm sorry for the scare. Thank you for the push. He looked at me. Thank you for the education. Teach it forward, I said. Use our folder like a textbook. He smiled. Already on the syllabus. Megan's follow-up aired that night. No villains, no victory lap. Just a sequence of how a decision can break, how a family can answer, and how a company can fix the part it owns. Dr. Patel got one sentence, simple and correct. When a patient is unstable, the safest stress test is the one you don't do. Latoya's hands made a cameo, taping a ring bag shut with reverence. They blurred Ed's face again. They didn't blur the phrase self-funded. We went home with a shoebox for pill bottles and a stack of papers that would have looked like a storm to me a week ago and now looked like a map. Ed took 2 steps into the kitchen and stopped. Smell that, he said, tomato leaves. He pinched a stem between finger and thumb and held it out. I breathed in the bitter green and the clean hope that hides in ordinary things. On Sunday, I posted one last update to the thread that had become a neighborhood. We're home, 2 stents, full flow. The plan reversed the denial. The company changed the rules. Here's what we learned in case you ever need it. Then I wrote the only list I hope strangers will print and tape to refrigerators they love. A short, useful guide for urgent health denials. Get the denial in writing. Ask for the exact policy/criteria used. Write down every name, time, and reference code. Designate a representative. Have the patient sign a HIPAA form so someone can speak and request records on their behalf. Build a human plus clinical packet. timeline, labs, imaging, meds with dates, nursing notes, and a letter of medical necessity from the treating specialist. In plain English, anchored to guidelines where it helps. File an urgent appeal within 72 hours. Use the word urgent. Fax, portal, email, confirm receipt, get names. If the plan is self-funded, go to the plan administrator. Cite ERISA Section 404, Fiduciary Duty, and 29C, F.R. Section 2560, 503-1, Full and Fair Review for Urgent Claims. Ask for a temporary authorization at Medicare indexed rates pending full review. Ask about external review. If your plan isn't grandfathered, you can request an independent reviewer fast. Shine a light wisely. Patient advocates, reporters, and your community can make the right people pick up the phone. Use light to open doors, not burn bridges you'll need to cross. People replied with little thumbs and big paragraphs. Saving this, a teacher wrote. Pinned, said a man whose avatar was a fishing boat. A cardiology nurse messaged, "You just made my job easier on Monday." 3 weeks later, an envelope came from the Department of Labor, EBSA. They'd logged our courtesy complaint, thanked us for the documentation, and reminded us that stories like ours inform enforcement. It wasn't fireworks. It was accountability with a return address. 90 days later, Carla sent Mark an internal dashboard. Anonymized, neat, because numbers too can be a form of apology. Urgent decision time down from 71 hours to 11. 12 cases fast-tracked. 0 treadmill stress tests ordered for unstable angina. She wrote, "Tell your mom we kept her tabs." I laughed out loud in the produce aisle and texted back a photo of a tomato big as a fist. We brought Latoya pie peach because gratitude should be warm, and a thank you note with our messy 4 names. She took the pie like it was something holy. "I told you sweet makes paper go down," she said. "Now go walk." We did, around the block and back, to the corner and back, to the park and back. Ed held my hand and swung it once, a boy with mischief remembering how. On a certain kind of evening, the light decides to forgive everything. It fell across our kitchen table where the folder still sat, not because we needed it, but because it had become, in its way, a family album. I slipped the external review letter into the front pocket and closed the cover. The spine had softened from use. Useful things do. I used to think insurance was a wall between us and care. Turns out it is also a mirror. Sometimes it shows you what a company is. Sometimes it shows you what you are. Sometimes, on the best days, it shows you what we owe each other when we're standing on either side of a door that does have hinges. That night, as the house quieted and the refrigerator sang its soft song, and the tomatoes slept their green sleep, I sat with a pen and wrote down one more sentence I want to remember the next time a clock and a policy argue with a pulse. When a heart hesitates, paperwork should hurry. And when the gate forgets it's a gate, love knocks until someone remembers how to open it.